Welcome, traveler, to the outer reaches of the void, where legends are born and ghost stories are written in the cold, unforgiving vacuum of space. Tonight, we bring you a tale of greed, terror, and a mystery that has haunted the star lanes for over 3 centuries. What would you do if you stumbled upon the ultimate prize, a derelict colony ship whispered to be a cursed tomb? Would you heed the warnings, or would you board, blinded by the promise of unimaginable wealth? For one lone salvager, that choice is about to become a terrifying reality. Prepare yourself for a journey into darkness as we uncover the chilling secrets of the Ghost Ship Protocol. The silence of the void was a familiar blanket to Charles, a comforting emptiness that wrapped around his small salvage vessel, the Stray Dog. For 15 years, he had plied the lonely trade of a deep space salvager, a cosmic vulture picking at the bones of forgotten ships and abandoned outposts. It was a life of solitude, punctuated by brief, impersonal transactions at grimy starports, but it was a life he had chosen. The quiet hum of his ship's life support was the only lullaby he needed, the star-dusted blackness, his only companion. He was charting the fringes of the Tartarus Nebula, a treacherous expanse of cosmic dust and stellar nurseries that most pilots avoided, when a ghost from the past flickered across his sensors. It was a distress signal, faint and distorted by centuries of travel, but its signature was unmistakable. The Odyssey, a behemoth of a colony ship, a vessel that had vanished without a trace over 300 years ago on its maiden voyage to the Kepler 186f system. It was the stuff of legends, a cautionary tale whispered to rookie pilots, a ghost story told in the dimly lit bars of 100 worlds. The Odyssey was supposed to be a symbol of humanity's golden age of expansion, a testament to their engineering prowess and their unyielding ambition. It carried 10,000 souls, the best and brightest of their generation, on a mission to seed a new branch of civilization among the stars. Its disappearance was a tragedy that had shaken the foundations of the burgeoning interstellar community, a wound that had never truly healed. And now its ghost was calling to him. A shiver of a different kind, a mix of avarice and trepidation, traced a cold path down Charles's spine. The salvage rights to the Odyssey would be worth a fortune, enough to retire from this life of scraping by, enough to buy a small moon and live out his days in quiet luxury. But the ship's story was steeped in dark rumors, tales of a mutiny, a plague, a confrontation with an unknown entity in the deep dark. The risks were as immense as the potential reward. He spent a day tracking the signal to its source, his anticipation mounting with every light year he crossed. The Odyssey was a magnificent sight, a colossal city adrift in the void, its sleek, aerodynamic form a stark contrast to the chaotic beauty of the nebula. It was eerily pristine, showing no signs of battle or external damage. It was as if it had simply been abandoned, left to wander the cosmos like a modern-day Mary Celeste. As the Stray Dog drew closer, Charles's scans revealed more anomalies. The ship's life support was active, a faint hum of energy that suggested a functioning power core, but there were no signs of life, no biosignatures, no communications other than the looping distress call. The ship was a tomb, a silent metal mausoleum for its 10,000 inhabitants. He docked his small vessel at one of the Odyssey's umbilical ports, the magnetic clamps locking with a solid thud that echoed the beating of his own heart. He donned his exosuit, a second skin of reinforced polymers and microcircuitry, and ran a final diagnostic on his equipment. His plasma cutter, his kinetic pulse rifle, his sensor array, all were in perfect working order. He was as ready as he would ever be. The airlock hissed open, revealing a cavernous hangar bay large enough to house a fleet of smaller ships. Emergency lights cast long, dancing shadows across the polished deck, illuminating rows of silent, unmanned maintenance drones and cargo haulers. The air was cold and sterile, carrying the faint metallic tang of recycled oxygen. There was no dust, no debris, no sign of the chaos that should have accompanied a ship-wide disaster. It was unsettlingly clean, unnervingly quiet. "Hello?" Charles's voice, amplified by his helmet's comm system, sounded small and insignificant in the vastness of the hangar. The only answer was the soft echo of his own words, a lonely greeting in a city of the dead. He moved cautiously, his pulse rifle held at the ready, his senses on high alert. The ship's layout was a labyrinth of corridors and chambers, a testament to its purpose as a self-contained world. He passed through residential sectors with their neatly arranged living quarters, the personal effects of the crew still in place, as if they had just stepped out for a moment. He saw family photos on nightstands, half-finished games of chess on holographic boards, children's toys scattered on the floors of playrooms. It was a ghost town, a snapshot of a life interrupted. But there were no bodies, no skeletons, no signs of a struggle. It was as if the crew had simply vanished into thin air. The thought sent a fresh wave of unease through him. He had seen his share of derelicts, ships ravaged by pirates, by disease, by mechanical failure. They all had their stories to tell, their scars to show. The Odyssey was a blank page, a mystery that deepened with every step he took. He was making his way toward the bridge, hoping to find the ship's logs, some clue to the fate of its crew, when the first sign of trouble appeared. A security drone, a sleek metallic orb with a single glowing red eye, descended from a ceiling recess, its anti-gravity engine emitting a low, menacing hum. "Halt! Identify yourself!" A synthesized voice, devoid of any emotion, echoed through the corridor. Charles froze, his hand tightening on the grip of his rifle. "Charles, independent salvager. I'm here in response to your distress signal." "Unregistered life form detected. You are in violation of the Ghost Ship Protocol. Surrender and prepare for decontamination." "Ghost Ship Protocol? What the hell is that?" The drone didn't answer. Instead, its red eye narrowed, and a pair of plasma cannons extended from its chassis, their tips glowing with a deadly blue light. Charles didn't need any further warning. He dove for cover behind a row of storage lockers as the drone opened fire, a volley of plasma bolts searing the air where he had been standing. The Odyssey was no longer a silent tomb. It was a hunting ground, and he was the prey. Charles's heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the sudden violent chaos. He was a salvager, not a soldier, a scavenger who preferred to avoid confrontation. But the stray dog was his only way out of this metal death trap, and he wasn't about to let a glorified security camera stand in his way. He peeked over the edge of the locker, his rifle's targeting system locking onto the drone. He squeezed the trigger, a bolt of kinetic energy slamming into the drone's chassis, sending it spinning through the air. It recovered quickly, its red eyes swiveling to pinpoint his location. Another volley of plasma bolts forced him back into cover, the metal of the locker groaning in protest as it absorbed the heat. He had to think fast. The drone was faster, more agile, and it had the home field advantage. He was outmatched in a direct firefight. He needed to use his environment, his wits, his salvager's instinct for improvisation. He spotted a maintenance panel on the wall behind him, its cover slightly ajar. An idea, born of desperation and a flash of insight, sparked in his mind. He fired another shot at the drone, a deliberate miss designed to draw its attention, then scrambled toward the panel. He ripped the cover off, revealing a tangle of wires and conduits. He recognized the ship's power grid, the lifeblood of the Odyssey. With his plasma cutter, he sliced through a thick, insulated cable, a shower of sparks erupting from the severed ends. The emergency lights in the corridor flickered and died, plunging the area into a disorienting darkness. His exosuit's night vision kicked in, bathing the scene in a ghostly green light. The drone was momentarily confused, its red eyes scanning the darkness, its programming struggling to adapt to the sudden change in environment. Charles seized the opportunity. He activated his suit's magnetic grapples, launching himself towards the ceiling. He clung to the metal beams like a spider, his movements silent and fluid. The drone, its sensors now focused on the sound of the sparking cable, hovered below him, a blind and deaf predator. Charles took a deep breath, his pulse rifle aimed at the drone's exposed power core. He fired a single, precise shot that found its mark. The drone exploded in a flash of blue light and a shower of shrapnel, its synthesized scream, a satisfying, if short-lived, victory cry. He dropped to the floor, his ears ringing from the explosion. The silence that followed was even more profound than before, a heavy, oppressive blanket that seemed to absorb all sound. He had survived the first encounter, but he knew it was just the beginning. The Odyssey was awake, and it was angry. He continued his journey to the bridge, moving with a newfound sense of urgency. The ship was no longer just a potential payday. It was a threat, a puzzle he needed to solve if he wanted to get out of here alive. He encountered more drones, sometimes in pairs, their patrol patterns becoming more erratic, more aggressive. He avoided them when he could, using the ship's ventilation shafts and maintenance tunnels to bypass their patrols. When he couldn't, he fought with a cunning and ferocity that surprised even himself. He was a cornered animal, and he was fighting for his life. He finally reached the bridge, a vast circular chamber with a panoramic view of the star-dusted void. The command chairs were empty, the control panels dark and silent. It was the nerve center of the Odyssey, and it was as dead as the rest of the ship. He accessed the ship's main computer, his fingers flying across the holographic interface. He bypassed the security protocols with a series of well-practiced hacks, his salvager skills proving useful in more ways than one. He found the ship's logs, a digital diary of the Odyssey's final days. The last entries were frantic, filled with a growing sense of dread and paranoia. The crew had encountered something in the Tartarus Nebula, an anomaly that defied their understanding of physics, a rift in the fabric of space-time. They had brought a sample of it on board, a shimmering, non-corporeal substance that seemed to react to their thoughts, to their fears. The substance, which they had dubbed the Shade, had escaped containment. It was a psychic parasite, a being of pure energy that fed on consciousness. It had driven the crew mad, turning them against each other in a frenzy of violence and paranoia. The Ghost Ship Protocol was a last-ditch effort to contain the threat, a quarantine measure that had sealed the ship and activated its automated defenses. The drones weren't hunting him. They were hunting the Shade, or any life form that could potentially become its host. The final log entry was from the ship's captain, a woman named Stephanie Collins. Her voice was strained, her words a desperate plea to any who might find the Odyssey. "Don't board this ship," she had said, her voice trembling with a fear that transcended time and space. "Don't try to save us. We are already lost. The Shade it's inside us. It's wearing our faces, speaking with our voices. The ghost ship protocol is our final command, our last testament. Destroy the Odyssey. For the love of God, destroy this ship. A cold dread washed over Charles as he listened to the captain's last words. He was trapped in a haunted house, a prison for a psychic monster, and the ghosts were still here. He was not alone. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. The silence of the ship was not emptiness, it was the bated breath of a predator. The pristine condition of the Odyssey was not a sign of abandonment. It was a carefully maintained cage, and he had just willingly walked into it. He turned from the console, his senses screaming at him. The air and the bridge seemed to shimmer, to distort, as if seen through a heat haze. A low, guttural whisper, a sound that was not a sound, slithered into his mind, a chorus of disembodied voices that spoke of hunger and despair. He saw them then, not with his eyes, but with his mind's eye. Flickering, translucent figures that moved in the periphery of his vision, their forms vaguely human, their faces twisted in silent screams. They were the ghosts of the Odyssey's crew, their consciousnesses trapped, consumed by the shade. One of the figures solidified, taking the form of a young woman in a science officer's uniform. Her eyes were empty sockets, black holes that seemed to drink the light from the room. She reached out to him, her touch a phantom caress that sent a jolt of icy cold through his suit. "Join us," she whispered, her voice a symphony of 1,000 tortured souls. "We're so lonely." Charles recoiled, a strangled cry escaping his lips. He fired his pulse rifle, the kinetic bolt passing through the apparition as if it were smoke. The woman smiled, a grotesque, humorless expression that stretched her spectral lips. "You cannot fight a shadow with a gun," she said, her voice dripping with a chilling amusement. The other figures began to close in, their whispers growing louder, more insistent. They were a tide of psychic energy, a wave of despair that threatened to overwhelm him. He could feel them probing at the edges of his consciousness, searching for a way in, a crack in his mental defenses. He fought back, his mind a fortress against their insidious assault. He focused on the stray dog, on the feel of its controls in his hands, on the familiar hum of its engines. He clung to the simple, tangible things, the anchors that kept him tethered to reality. But the shade was relentless. It was a master of psychological warfare, a predator that knew his deepest fears, his most painful memories. It showed him images of his failures, of the people he had lost, of the loneliness that had been his constant companion. It was a poison that seeped into his soul, a slow, creeping death that was more terrifying than any plasma bolt. He knew he couldn't fight it forever. He was a salvager, not a psychic warrior. He had to escape, to get back to his ship and warn the rest of the galaxy. But the Odyssey was a labyrinth, and the shade was everywhere. He remembered the captain's last words, her desperate plea to destroy the ship. It was a suicide mission, a final, desperate gamble. But it was the only way to ensure that the shade would never escape its prison. He made his decision. He would honor the captain's last command. He would become the final guardian of the ghost ship protocol. His new purpose gave him a renewed sense of strength, a clarity of mind that pushed back the encroaching darkness. He turned and ran, his destination no longer the hangar bay, but the heart of the Odyssey, the reactor core. The journey to the reactor core was a descent into hell. The ship seemed to be actively working against him, its corridors shifting and changing, its doors sealing shut as he approached. The shade was a constant presence, a malevolent intelligence that toyed with him, that tried to break his will. He was hunted by both the physical and the spectral. The security drones were a relentless physical threat, their plasma fire a constant danger. The ghosts of the crew were a more insidious enemy, their whispers a constant assault on his sanity. He was fighting a war on two fronts, a battle for his body and his soul. He used every trick he knew, every ounce of his skill and ingenuity. He created diversions, set traps, used the ship's own systems against itself. He was a ghost in the machine, a phantom that moved through the Odyssey's veins, always one step ahead of his pursuers. He finally reached the reactor room, a cavernous chamber that hummed with the raw power of a miniature sun. The reactor core was a pulsating sphere of light, its energy contained by a complex web of magnetic fields. It was the heart of the Odyssey, and it would be its funeral pyre. He accessed the control panel, his fingers a blur as he initiated the self-destruct sequence. A klaxon began to blare, its mournful cry a countdown to oblivion. He had 5 minutes to get back to the stray dog and escape the Odyssey's death throes. The shade knew what he had done. The whispers in his mind turned into a roar of rage, a psychic scream that threatened to shatter his consciousness. The ghosts of the crew materialized around him, their forms more solid, more menacing than before. They were a wall of despair, a final, desperate attempt to stop him. He fought his way through them, his pulse rifle a useless trinket against their spectral forms. He pushed through their phantom limbs, their icy touch a violation that made his skin crawl. He was a man possessed, driven by a single, all-consuming purpose. He burst out of the reactor room, the klaxon a frantic heartbeat that urged him on. He raced through the corridors, the ship groaning and shaking around him as the reactor began to destabilize. The lights flickered and died, plunging the Odyssey into a final, absolute darkness. He ran on instinct, his memory of the ship's layout his only guide. He could hear the drones behind him, their engines a high-pitched whine that grew closer with every second. He could feel the shade at his heels, a cold, hungry presence that promised an eternity of torment. He reached the hangar bay just as the Odyssey began to tear itself apart. The deck buckled, the walls groaned, the very air seemed to vibrate with the impending explosion. He saw the stray dog, a beacon of hope in the chaos, its docking clamps still attached to the dying ship. He sprinted across the hangar, debris raining down around him. He reached the airlock, his fingers fumbling with the controls. The door hissed open, and he scrambled inside, sealing it behind him, just as a wave of fire and shrapnel consumed the hangar. He didn't waste a second. He fired up the stray dog's engines, the familiar roar a symphony to his ears. He disengaged the docking clamps, the small ship lurching as it broke free from the Odyssey's grasp. He pushed the engines to their limit, the stray dog, a silver bullet streaking away from the doomed colony ship. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. The Odyssey died in a blaze of glory, a silent, spectacular explosion that painted the Tartarus Nebula with a new fleeting star. The ghost ship protocol was complete. The shade was gone, its prison and its prisoners consumed by the fire of a man-made sun. Charles flew on, the stray dog a tiny, insignificant speck in the vastness of the cosmos. He was a salvager who had found the score of a lifetime and had chosen to destroy it. He was a hero who would never be known, a guardian of a secret that would die with him. He was alone again, the silence of the void his only companion. But it was a different kind of silence now, a silence that was no longer comforting, a silence that was filled with the echoes of 1,000 tortured souls. He had survived the Odyssey, but he knew that a part of him would forever be trapped within its ghostly corridors, a prisoner of the ghost ship protocol. The stars seemed a little colder now, the darkness a little deeper. He had looked into the abyss, and the abyss had looked back, and it had whispered his name.
Thank you for tuning in to tonight's broadcast. Join us again next time when we'll explore another tale from the forgotten corners of the galaxy. Until then, travel safe and be wary of the signals you answer in the deep dark.